great show for us. It's really all about rights and how that could have just come contracted, and how bodies just could have become collateral. We're all born, and we're not born to be latched. Our rights are that you're not latched. So, but what happens when you're latched? You see, the body becomes collateral for something going on, and this is why the jailhouse is filled up. But under CB Cower is a criminal banking cartel of the One World Order. Everyone could see that this is really what's going on, and the talk of everything is sort of far below this. And it's like, jumping on the bus driver, for instance, because she didn't do something or whatever, rather than who's in charge of all the buses. But under a criminal banking cartel of a one world system, you have what's civic law, and that means contract law. And under a civics, basically everybody's dead in the head. And the moment that the 13th and 14th Amendment was, everybody started to get rounded up. Go ahead and have a look in history. Was anybody rounded up before that point? No. So the 13th and 14th Amendment causes corporate citizenship to come along, which is communism outright, because you've got no rights where that is. You're under some contracted latchness. So how civics gets you contracted, but then most people really aren't under a contract at all. It just appears that way because that's the way your Social Security Administration has filled out things where you're only considered as a trustee versus a beneficiary, which you're the beneficiary. But once somebody would be contracted and being civic, it's like if you go back to the plantations, you had really cheap labour, it's very slaved out. And in the early 1900s, you've got bankers with a story, and they're really wanting to make sure that everybody's under some pledge system. And tyranny means slavery. And you could say that things are relatively the same today, meaning you've got lots of people acting under a slaved condition as being latched. So under the law, it pretends to know, but doesn't itself. But it's you who could look at the things which is lawful and uphold the constitutional and Bill of Rights that could be existed, which those are things which could have been really violated. And no state could make any laws and pass any laws which abridge rights that you have. And there's plenty of statutes and things which is based upon common law, and where people are in the field and they didn't do that at all. These are people who are not credible witnesses, and they could be put on the Brady list if you could look into that. So who doesn't uphold rights really and gets violated because of this? And now it's up to you and I to be able to uphold our right. And this is in the private side of the court, which is really an Article 3 or an Article 4 court. And it's a court of record. Otherwise, could you say that lots of crime really is happening because of the crime of title conversion? Lots of things have gone on where even people have been put in jail and this sort of thing, and there really isn't any proper claim existed because there's no victim where anything is. So under statutes, of course, which is written in code, but it's supposed to be coming from something positive that relate to a right that you have. So 18 U.S.C. Section 912, anybody could be fined or even jailed up to 3 years where there was like a nativity, your nativity, for instance, that's been taken over by the word birth, which birth is like a ship, a vessel is come into dock. That's what birthing is, and the cargo has to be given over by the stevedore to the stevedore at the bank where the ship came in. and the birth certificate listed everyone as someone who's been sold and under a contract basic. And so this is the Great Council that really runs the criminal banking cartel of a one world order and owns the crown, and that's the state of the state that owns the birth certificate. And so that's a private company that's owned by its stockholders, and it's using yours or my name to put onto various things to those numbers are used to locate stock and things. You're the real estate, and that your birth certificate is the real estate. So looking, you could see that the all caps is a bond, where that name is, and to get that they had to say that your mother really wasn't certain, and she's an informant, which is, these are things that's forgery. And so everyone then has sold their soul, a parent, to be pledged to be able to do what you can where your work is, and then that your work would pay off the debt. And saved, of course, under that circumstance, it's sort of lost at sea versus in the Holy See. And so a corpse is really your thinking, anyone else's thinking, that's corporate. And that is yours. You know, you own your own corpse. You don't need a license or anything. That's your business, and it's already made. And otherwise, currency uses the numbers on those certificates and things, and the Social Security documents that you filled out. And so, you know, it turns anybody there into a co-trustee of the account, and it causes people's bodies to then be brought into the circumstance of things. And these are all completely against anyone's rights. So what's set up administratively, it's like if someone had anything, they could get a 508 C1A, for instance, and it shows that 100% of that limited liability corporation is owned by a private foreign national, rather than someone that's owned and as a corporation. You as a state citizen, you're a private foreign, meaning outside the corporation, from the land. So you're a private foreign national, and that's an American. Otherwise, somebody's really only a corporate citizen. But, you know, there wouldn't be documents, which there is, where the IRS is, like the 508 C1A, that someone could fill out to show who's the owner, more or less, of that LLC. And so you're looking at things to avoid what's unnecessary where taxation is and things. So someone could gain function, and they could come along where some engineered molecule is, and just like the human papilloma or herpes or smallpox or polio, the DPT shots and things. But if we could look at that, you could see that none of those conditions have ever been isolated as something exists specific that relates to that, and that is the cause of that. And when people got shot up after that, lots got sick. And before people got shot up, mercury and all sorts of heavy metals and things was given to people willy-nilly, but it did cause all kinds of symptoms that people had that could be called syphilis and all sorts of things in the past. But if somebody uses technology a bit to see that they could, like a PCR test that could recover what basically is present in the body, it's continuously copied over and over, and things that come out of that can be things that's specific to sequencing, and that which is the sequence of amino acids and things which really someone could have from AIDS in the era of what that is. And these molecules that got shot in and things that's synthetic are quite a bit behind a lot of conditions that people end up having in their lives. And so what's the reason why somebody wouldn't be focused on the immune system? Because that's certain. But destroying the immune system with insecticide and herbicide, and like what glyphosate is, and many other ingredients beyond glyphosate in Roundup. You've got, let's say, just for Roundup, for instance, you've got $16 billion that's been set aside for compensation. The toxin is found where the body is, and even small amounts in relation to everything. But that 16 billion that's been put aside is really so small in relation to the amount of sales and things that came along to accompany. So you wonder about that of itself, and somebody personally being responsible should be. That's important, and that somebody has been harmed or something is harmful where something is. We should all have the ability to have a claim about that. Otherwise, a great attrition is of our rights and everything. But so if a PCR test is looked at and someone's looking at what's going on where someone's body is it not an uncommon thing that the simian 40 V virus comes out? The promiscuousness of that copied antibody becomes a tattoo, like in your body, and a gain of function was existed because an antibody was created for that, and so it's sort of like a forever molecule, which is synthetic. It can't be broken down, and it's busy, not ever really to be got broken down much. So what's the reason why a contaminated tissue couldn't have been chosen or was chosen? A lot of things that go on, which is looking at something, can injure something whilst it looks at that, and these are things which aren't so good. Lots of things are engineered by the big agri-pharma more, and such big companies don't seem to have been able to be got at by anyone's claim, especially if it's been put so that you're just appearing as a 14th Amendment slave, whereas it's rising to the level of being a man or a woman and moving things over to the right side of the court. These are things that could help, but otherwise, like you've got 91 DIVOC, which if you look at that backwards, that's COVID-19, spelt backwards. So in the 1915s, you've got patsies all get paid up and monopolists, and the engineeredness of the Spanish flu where the world is. And over 100 years ago, the same thing is going on today, no difference. So no claim is needed that no one asked for this. None took anyone to court, except like there's maybe 9 people that took a couple of people to court in the Netherlands. But other than that, like, where is anybody actually who's got a claim? Everybody has a claim, and has anyone asked for this to be expressed, you see? So the last time the Supreme Court was enacted might have been many, many years ago, and the guild who runs the courthouse, wrongfully, of course, and especially like family court is a good example, you've really got the state prosecuting everyone and thousands of attorneys behind it, and you're just sitting there, and have you got the same force to help protect you? The forces that exist are set up to actually take children away, and that's just awful. Why? Because you're only listed in your status as chattel, meaning just things to move around, and not you, the living being, but just dead as a corporation under vice admiralty procedure. So looking at genocide where this is going on in the child, nobody's going to say that the family court system has taken all these children away non-stop and continuing to do that. Has anybody listened into or even watched and observed what goes on where the child is going to be taken out of the home and what happens where the parents are themselves and this sort of thing? It's truly disastrous, almost. And so we've got a lot of strong people during this time, and private prosecution on the right side of the court you really should look into, because you've got your answers there and a remedy of them all. And otherwise, what somebody should be doing is Article 3 and Article 4, and this is where you and I, we're able to shape and take public opinion and put this to public policy and shape legislation. But you're not going to be able to do that if you're just a 14th and 13th Amendment slave. And your status is something which you can choose any moment. You can upgrade that. And there's no law that stops you from being able to upgrade your status, and that's something which you could do any time. But so, coming back, to words that are used, like the word cure, for instance. Curing comes from a time frame when lots of people are curing skins, animal skins. When you cure the animal skin, you're putting tannins and things in it, which is cyanide, to tan it, and the cyanide blocks and stops it from being able to be broken down anymore. But now you can be having cyanide where that is. So other things that they did to cure would be to put flesh, all sorts of flesh, up a chimney and smoke it. And once it was smoked, dried a bit and this sort of thing, they noticed it would really stop it from rotting. And the chemical that would come into the meat would be like a creosote solvent. And so burning fires to petrify bodies, you could use this to keep flesh from rotting, right? And it was called curing the flesh, curing it. It was like pickling it. At the same time, you've got lots of chemicals which are used and starting to be used in canning and things as well, because they notice if you have a bit of this chemical, it's going to maybe stop fermentation, perhaps. And so to cure something is really the same word as to be able to pickle or use sulfur or even inland salts, which is unphysiological salts. So it's not a good word really for anybody to use today, because also that word cure, it's sort of trademark to be like, oh yeah, some chemical that's being used and it has some effect. And so what's related where that is to commerce and trade, for instance, you've really got the word like cure, which comes along today, and its meaning, it takes away what the word is, which is really from healing, and replacing that word healing with the word cure, which to cure a skin would be, as we talked about, to cure the flesh up a chimney, to cure by pickling, chemicalizing, and to preserve something by chemicalizing to give it a longer shelf life. And to make a product like a modern hamburger, for instance, that you could keep for 20 years or more wrapped up, and you unwrap it after 25 years or more, which some have been done, like McDonald's, for instance, and other fast food establishments. You could see that not a single bit of it was broken down at all over a long period of time. And why? Because the chemicals that's in there that cured that. It pickled it. It stopped it from being able to be broken down, because you've got chemicals in that and a process of preserving, so it won't break down. And so you're looking at a word used ignorantly, of course, and how the word is used to control. So property just simply was all of the private things that you had. And then when the code was written, by the French, and they'd put French words in. We would decide, like a tiff of a plaint, which if you have a commie plaint, but most people actually have a claim, not a commie plaint. But everybody in English is saying that somebody's complaining when they're maybe not complaining at all. They actually have a claim. And so the words that you use, all like property, the word children gets taken out of the word property. And so that's code. And so, that's not something that you can own. Because a child relates to a state of mind, and the state of mind is not something that you can own, though you should, because a feeling is corporate. That's your corporate self, your feeling, and that is your property. It's just that how it's listed is listed not as children, for instance, and not property, where in the older terms of the way that everything has been written, that is your property. It's a child's property to have a mother and a father, and it's a mother and a father's property to have their child up until an age of reason and this sort of thing. And it's your property for so many reasons that relate to what you made. No one else made that. And so it's a very good example of what's your property. It's what you made, and it's more your capacity to be able to be the father or the mother, the parent, where this is. Otherwise, most just end up as being the X all the way through the child's life, and no matter what you do, that's why you're sort of branded as the X. So if you notice that where all our students are tuning into our podcast and everything, the message really is where the words are and what the meaning of this is. So healed or healing process or going into remission, these are words that get slowly taken over by the big pharma using words just to relate to some problem that someone has and describing all of that. And it's a basic pickling to cure where the body is with chemicals, and it's a natural healing and these sorts of things, and wordedness about all of this goes more by the wayside. So nobody will say somebody's an anti-naturalist. Why? Because they're not working to create better immunity. Quite the opposite. So that's definite. They must be an anti-naturalist. So the word cure is crept along, and the usage of it really has been picked up a lot because it's just commercialized. It's definite that no one should monopolize what medicine is, but because we saw the monopolization of medicine and other things like court and currency and media and these things, how can anybody have any transparency or have any consent? It's generally not. And so it's the big pharma and CB Cower that owns that system, more or less, that uses the word cure, and it's one of their pharmaceutical products, basically. So cure, as a word, it means to have accepted that the establishment might have shown you what's supposed to be for something. And if the system didn't do that, well, how could somebody else use that word cure? They're not allowed to use the word cure. And so who's got some commercial interest has got everybody else underneath that, just like the big pharma does. And to today, the guild, where the courthouse is the same thing, something is put into Cantonese or Vietnamese or Chinese or legalese, and that's all code for English, but not using English. It's like you could just say, look, I want you to use English, that's it. And I want this to be a common law court of record. Otherwise, somebody's just getting drafted into a condition where you're not able to have spoken. And wouldn't you say that's the biggest condition that most everybody's under? And so how the hell can any claims get settled where that is? So it's really like chemicals where they are, chemicals are taken to manage some symptom, but none of them are designed to manage a symptom. Most everyone on the small packet says you could just do this to be able to affect the condition a bit, symptomatic, but none of these chemicals and things are used. Oh, we're going to use this to manage the whole situation, you see. So what's not of any regularity that's allowed, it really, all of it is done without you having given any permission. Like nobody gave permission to get rid of cash, for instance. And you can see that the way they did that first, they said to the Chinese and others, gee, this cash is dirty. You can't touch that because you're going to have something caught, which nothing exists such like that. There is no such thing as anything contagious. So the word cure comes along as a word because it's owned, and the criminal bank cartel of a one world order, which is a monopoly. Where curing is, the connotation is for the skin to be curdled maybe more, and the skin could occur that way by tanning it, and cyanide would be present there, or creosote, where things were smoked up the chimney. And around 1743, you could describe most people's diet really isn't really consuming any flesh much. Matter of fact, when you look at all the foods that were given to soldiers, even in the field, in the past and stuff, you could see most of it was like vegetarian pretty much. And so in 1743, you're really describing flesh not rotting from pigs and fish and frogs and animal flesh being salted, called curing, and drying and smoking of those, and essentially curing it. So it was really to put toxic chemicals like phosphates and bromides and creosote and non-physiological salts into something to stop it from being able to turn. It gives it such a long shelf life. It could remain there for 25 years and not be touched. And so mercury was just being mined, yes, and unphysiological salts and heavy metals. And these were all caused to be called a cure. But they really did stop life from being able to break down naturally. And that's not a benefit at all, but something opposite. It's really a cure. And what really is healing would be just managing the ferment in your body and being able to not have that ferment and secondary rot. But where food, slowly but surely, becomes cured, it becomes chemicalized. It becomes like an animal skin that's pickled with chemicals to tan it so that you could put it over your furniture and it's not going to rot or anything. And so many years later, it's all looking relatively the same. Has a very long shelf life. It prevents decay. But the word cure is really a bit of a dirty word because it actually really comes out of this time frame, and generally it's just somebody really getting into trouble where that is. So it's recommended that you'd look into the value of what words that you're using and this sort of a thing, because the word, like for instance, woman, which is our title doesn't exist the same as if you're a nurse or a police officer or a judge or a person. These are all offices and states of mind. Like human is a state of mind. It's not your title as human, but it's just like a figment of your imagination in your head. And so where toxins are today could be really warded off and no longer be present quite like it is. Couldn't you say that it's really most disease and aging is really because chemicalization has gone on? And what's anti-naturalist? What's anti-nature? Somebody's an anti-naturalist. If you raise the body's capacity for phagocytic activity, meaning you've got immune cells which are helping to clear and clean things up, don't you think that's proper? And wouldn't that be the actual condition that you should strive to have? Where something hasn't worked like that, you'd want to get that back, wouldn't you? And what's chemicals going to do? Is it going to actually cause everything to really no longer function? But if you've bought food stuff in that's got like a chloride molecule, chlorine, it's got a couple of oxygen molecules like chlorine dioxin, you've got substances that eco-sterilize and keep the blood relatively clean because you've got micro voltage that the phagocytic cells can use to clear away substances and things which is not meant to be there. So in health, your micro voltage is raised, and micro mineral is necessary for this. And plant-based herbs, they've got natural pasiflora in it. An antibiotic is kind of really not a good word, antibiotic, but a natural pasiflora really stops and blocks fermentation from going on. And so for me, I've been looking for where I could find things just like that. I could find these in bushes that really didn't require so much sunlight, but actually grew more from life colloid in the soil, like heath bushes do. And the roots from these and this sort of thing is really what I brought into the product that we have. So these elements are more tremendously a lot more heat, like heat and cold shock protein, and like you could bring in sulfur, natural forms of it. And you've got a sulfur dioxide, and you've got chlorine dioxide. And these are things which have very high voltage and used magnetically to reduce all the mold, fungus, and yeast and other material that needs to be broken down, and it gets broken down to below the level of hydrogen. So upstream cleaning is focusing more, what's at the top of where you are? That's a rock life that's been turning everything else. You've got to go to that rock and unturn it. And that's going to be typical that you've got to focus on the digestive tract, and everything else is really downstream. And so upstream cleaning is to be focused on, because if you're going to clean a river, you're not going to start down the bottom end of it. You have to start at the top of the head, and so slowly but surely you work your way downstream, and the stream will be clean. But if you start at the bottom and work your way up to the top, this is going to be pretty disastrous overall. It's not going to work. So if you're keeping a magnetic charge where things are, you've got proper peristaltic activity, food is moving through you. But what happens if somebody did a colonic or something and it really knocked out the magnetic charge in the colon and stopped peristaltic activity afterward? It's very, very downstream. It's way too much downstream. It doesn't mean that something could be done there where that is, but it's certain that the water that they put in and all these sorts of things cannot be structured whatsoever. And it leaves the tissue of the colon without proper magnetics. So it often is the case that when somebody has those colonics and stuff, they can lose the capacity to be able to empty their bowels afterward. So we've got diluted coffee which could go in where an enema is and things, and you could put some fresh urine into that to help structure it. And that coffee enema really is used where the program is to relax the sphincter of the body so that you could get more stones dumped out. And the biggest thing that we do is very focused on 3 types of amino acids, our formula, but also our education. And that's to do with the aromatic amino acid that's so important to be able to, as a ligament, transport properly most micronutrients and things. So where someone is applying more life food, it's osmolytic, meaning it's going to be able to pass through the pores where it should. And it's in an orthophilic state, meaning it's straight with nature, meaning, you know, it's an orthophilic salt or it's an orthophilic element, meaning it's passed through life and it's become conditioned. It's enzymatically active, basically. And you've got to focus on things not being cooked out so much that it's completely a ceramide. And it's no longer got, has this proper structure. It's very congealed and coagulated instead. And everyone knows, of course, you can't go into the desert and find the salt and start licking stuff there. thinking that, oh, this is going to be the salt that you need. It's very toxic that you can't sort of see anything too much growing where all that salt is. And there's a reason why. So if you know that your intestine produces a certain amount of protein for you, how good is that you do know that? You see, most people don't know that your intestine produces protein for you. The life colloid does. So if you know how seed oils are so dangerous, all those vegetable oils, and then the animal fat also, it's very dangerous because you've got a lot of omega-3, omega-6, omega-9 all in an oxidative state. And so it's sort of very oxidizing. So live food really is based upon mother's milk, yes. And why shouldn't it be? You've studied mother's milk. You understand what the amino acids are in that and things. Same with colostrum. You see what one of the primary factors in that is N-acetylneurominic acid, which is a surfactant that we're supposed to have. And that's so different from the surfactant in an animal. It can't be brought in where the surfactant is from an animal because it's not easily able to be broken down whatsoever. And basic attention it is to preparing food to make it easy to digest and having a natural array of enzyme to be able to have a proper zeta potential, meaning, the nutrient has easier ability to be able to pass through the bulk of something else with a different charge and is able to get through that bulk. And that's where your nutrient has a proper zeta potential to be able to do that. So live food, which you could learn more about and positive, it's a monophasic plant-based program, meaning you're eating once a day, basically. And it really is everything that's plant-based, but minus bean and flesh. So it's the absence of the indigestible protein and all the prion that otherwise would come in, which is protein-like molecules which really can't be broken down properly by the body, and it sort of serves more as a sort of like a forever chemical, in other words, which clogs and blocks proper conduction of the body like it's supposed to have. So the absence of what's not digestible, that's what live food is. The absence of toxic protein, that's what live food is. And so otherwise, somebody could have got away way too much phosphate in the foods that they ate in relation to calcium. And that's not live food. So demonocracy is where anybody's just been kept as a 14th Amendment slave. The vast majority of people have never activated the right side of the court to be able to assist to help so that public opinion can come to have public policy, where these are courts which can make laws and things where other courts can't. And so is any proper laws being made to help protect us, you see? So the word plaintiff, as we were talking about, is a French word. It means a whinging, whining hag. And that's how that's all used, a plaintiff. And the other side of whoever is on the battered end of that is a deaf-ended ant, defendant. And these is not your title, all right? And so, because you're not under any title, you're under some occupation, and occupation isn't a title. The occupation is just like a mental set, and so it's a comic plaint because it's not really like a claim. A claim is really where you've used a real true name, and you're learning about how to assist all of us by using more the right side of the court, which is the private sector of the nation, which really must get going and help, because it's only that the democracy, or could you say the republic, works. And why do you have that? Because you're meaning do it again, publicing the debt. You're republicing the debt, and the venue is from the land. And where you have revenue, you're bringing that currency back to the land. And so, we should be selecting a republic at peace as part of all the things that we're doing. And why shouldn't that be the biggest thing that's a big focus on? Because otherwise, just only war is down the road all the time, non-stop. especially where interest is never made in the system, which is illogical. You're making the principal, but you're never ever making the interest. And what goes on where that is always a shortfall. And that's the reason for war. Wars are fought because of banking, basically. So never a process which uses only some communistic commie plaint, who's going to get anywhere with a commie plaint? And where somebody has a claim today, others will correct you, or they're not correcting you, they're just calling it a commie plaint that you have, meaning you're a whinging, whining hag. You really don't have a claim behind anything that you're doing. So as you're the claimant and you've got this republic at peace and we've selected that it's a social compact, it's giving others who are looking at our system how to relate to us as a nation, as a people. Otherwise, what's going on is that's being diminished, incredible, and who wants to invest in anything which you can't have any claim properly settled? And so that's the problem from all these other systems. They're not attractive for anybody to invest anything in. Why? Well, because it would be if it is because you can have a claim heard. Where you can't have a claim heard, is that where you want to put your money? No, not at all. So as the doors of eye awareness are open more, you've got three limited types of states, states of being otherwise. The state that's over these other three, of course, is awareness. Awareness is over perception. Everything else is the three states are really about degrees of perception. And being awake, of course, is very limited to only seven plus or minus two chunks of information in any one period of time. So it's very limited. That's wakefulness. Sleep is certainly pretty, compromised where something is, where that is. And dreaming is as well. These are all fictional more. So awareness is over the top of these other three states, and it's the unbounded shorelessness that's existing behind your eyes. And so the doors that you and I have in eye awareness is really having the ability to have shut down your own inner dialogue and polarize, to that matter of fact, so that you have access more to stop, start, redirect, where the vestibular sense is, which is your whole body movements and you becoming more skillful in the way the vestibular sense is used. But it's certain, of course, that while somebody's got no inner dialogue, they're the most receptive that anyone could be. So in eye awareness, it's not just a lens that's beyond your senses. It's really who is real is aware of perception. Otherwise, that's not real. It's like something which is dead itself, and it's not aware of perception. It doesn't have livingness. And so if we know that we can't lick rocks, for instance, to get our nutrition, and we're not going to be able to get anywhere under Vice Admiralty as only being under Chattel, which everybody should refuse to have those sorts of procedures. It's just really wrong. Why don't you get into your own suit rather than being left in someone else's suit, and open something up in the suit, in the claim that's there, and open it up as a common law court of record, you see, as an adverse counterclaim to anything that else has gone on. So if you can't get a food label on a product, and a lot of these products that are being sold doesn't have a nutrient label. No, it doesn't. The word that's used is a ment that's supple, meaning a ment that's flexible, meaning a ment which is mind, and supple means very flexible. You've got to have a flexible mind to consume this product, because it's why it's not a nutrient. So all supplements are very problematic. Why? Well, because you've got stuff in there that absolutely couldn't be called a nutrient at all. Otherwise, it's got a nutrient label, good. And something otherwise is very enzymatic resistant. And, supplements that's made out of pea protein powder and rice protein powders and things just like that, very glassified, and other elements that's in it that really isn't food either. And so it can't be sold as a nutrient. doesn't have a nutrient label. It's called a ment that's supple, a supple ment. And so when you're looking at the putting superlatives in front of words and qualifying words in front of something, it just shows the bias wherever anyone is. And so, for instance, if I said, you have to be a super woman, most women are going to go, hell, being a woman is enough. We don't have to be super women to be accepted. But this is sort of what they've done where men is. So they've got a super man, and so it's not good enough for you just to be a man. You have to be a super man. And so that's an example of putting superlatives and things that's in front of a word, and like calling something the ultra mega super, the ultra mega superfood, for instance. What does that mean? It means most everything else must be really inferior, which it isn't. These supplements are certainly inferior. None of those could be called super. But what's the reason to call something super? You see, so rock salt comes along in this time, and that's called a food that's super. And rock salts from the mountains, all ground up and powdered down. It never really was ever sold in the health food stores. But suddenly, people come along and they've got no idea. You can't lip your rocks and get your minerals. And so they're selling this as a ment that's supple, meaning a supple ment, and it's not a nutrient at all. And you can only have 6 grams of that mountain rock powdered down. Otherwise, it's really toxic, you see, because you can't break it down. So how about what's gone on? They're putting this into baby food, and extraneous, excessive amounts of pigment goes on where people's food is. And this is really not live food. And sometimes you can have such extreme levels of phosphate, like into the couple thousand, where it's only got one element of itself, it's calcium, but 2,000 other parts, which is phosphate. These are kinds of foods and stuff which like spirulina, you could get a benefit up to a certain degree, but then watch out because it's so extreme where phosphate is. And somebody could do something like that for a short moment of time, but this is really not something that you could continue to do. You could have a small amount of it and that would work, but we're not designed to be able to just live off something like that. Why? Because it's got such excessive phosphate in relation to calcium. So plant-based food is certainly ethical and also ecological, and it's most sublime. If you look into this work, you're going to see, this work really comes about more from a neurobehavior, physiological, Western trained sort of background more, and life food movement really gets swallowed up, of course, and starts to become more shunned as a science, but it's going along with everything else, which is using slippery slope to get along where something is. Like I've said in other podcasts, I would ask people what the definition of a fruit is and put their hand up if they knew the meaning of it. People were a bit afraid to put their hand up because maybe it wouldn't be quite right what they said. Most people's idea what a frugivore is completely wrong. And even what the definition of a fruit is actually. So if you don't know these things, it's going to be very easy to be picked up and taken by anything that's slippery slope. What does slippery slope mean? It means an inference which is fallacious. It means something which is a claim isn't being spoken as if it doesn't exist. It's spoken as if it does, but there isn't a claim there at all. But something else, somebody's gone on to something else, and that's, as part of a basis of something that occurred. And this is called a slippery slope. Others got a lot of bandwagon. It's like Timothy and Mary and Roger and Jane and Ralph and all these people. They all are going along where something is said, and this is just a fallacious type of reasoning too. It's called bandwagon appeal. So where something is stated more as longevity, certain it is that you've got remission of symptoms, and certain it is that you've got cell rejuvenation. If you have those things, then you're raising albumin. Why? Because you must have reduced fibrin and globulin to have rejuvenation. And if you haven't done those things, have you done rejuvenation? No. And shouldn't something be designed more by someone who has some deeper insight into all these things? And you can do a cleanse and get rid of stone out of your body and improve the body incredibly. And so where commercial conditioning is, a lot of education just comes from commercial conditioning. It starts out by lacking any study, for instance, in botanical science, okay? And anybody that you ask, what's the difference between what's botanical versus what's biological? If they should be able to tell you those things, why not? Also, like what the definition of a fruit is, but most have never studied botany a day in their life. So no one is taught except sort of what we've been doing more, where life food is and what proper somatotyping is. What's that mean? It means that something in your environment has shaped your body to be a certain way, and that's called somatotyping. So if you're looking mostly at uneducated, lack sort of science, and you don't know about hygienicness of the blood and this sort of thing, you haven't heard about life food. And this is really like anything. It's sort of like if you're looking at currency, why shouldn't it be that you understand money mechanics? Because we don't understand money mechanics, all of us just going along with what anybody's saying. This is just really disastrous. Maybe you should look into the and a usury less currency. We don't need more usury. This is just really criminal and wrong. Any currency where usury is, as a system, is outright like slavery. So just like cure, it's just an absolutely dirty word to use. It's not a proper word. It means to be chemicalized, pickled. But what happens where you look at life food and you see, part of the definition of life food is that it's prepared in a way to make it easy to digest. It's like, what? It's like, yeah, that's right. Plant-based food is prepared. It's prepared in a way to make it easier to digest. Okay, because a lot of things have to be processed a bit. Otherwise, they've got substances in there and that sort of thing, which if it's not taken out, it can't be sort of consumed so properly. It's like if broccoli is blanched, you're going to have an easier capacity to be able to digest that, and because it's more in an unconscious state versus, I'm going to just munch on that, but it's fighting you in your mouth. It's really living, and it's not unconscious in a state. And so where the broccoli would become blanched, suddenly it becomes brighter and suddenly becomes much easier to be able to digest. And you're preparing food in a way that makes it easier to digest. And you're keeping a sense of making sure the meal has some enzymatic activity about it. And calorie restriction is like really eating only once a day more because you're going to live a longer life. And how about flushing the stone out so that it really is supporting you to have a better blood-borne inhibitors to block this and stop the expression of mold, fungus, and yeast in the body. So if you ask anyone, hey, do you know how enzymes are transported? They go, what? Wow, that's right. Ask any doctor, and they're not going to be able to tell you. How bad is that? This is terrible. You've got a doctor, apparently, who's supposed to know things, and especially about health, but the very basic baby level is got no idea how enzymes are transported. Also, where somebody's into raw food, for instance, they've got no idea about enzyme inhibitors being in that raw food. And so most are picking up and it's like a bit of a half-baked information from people who are half-baked. And so you've got the 4 blood types, and these blood types, or, I've just got antibodies to toxin. And the different sorts of blood types are antibodies to all sorts of toxin. And where somebody doesn't really have that, they might show they have more O negative blood. But the blood type was introduced, and then you had like a diet for these people. It's like this, it was completely, totally unscientific, not a scrap of science, zero. Now, when you look at the back of the book, like that book, that 4-blood book type, can you find enzymes listed in the subject index? No. It's like, what? Here's somebody who studied or apparently wrote a book about nutrition and they have no idea about enzymes. This is just really wrong outright. So then you've got all these popular diets that have come along, and then they just disappear too, like South Beach and the Neanderthal or the keto. And then you have others calling something raw food. Then you have others calling something superfood. And you've got the raw food diet and the superfood diet. And it's like, what is that? I think we're living in a time where most just really want to do something and they want to have thought, oh, I'll leave behind something. But no study was behind what they left behind, you see. So studying all of this, you wouldn't think that you're going to get anywhere unless you have studied mother's milk. Why not? Why should you not be completely understanding of our own species milk? And isn't that the basic that you're supposed to know? Why? Well, because they're the building blocks that you better have those when you're growing. When you're a baby, you're going to really need to grow, aren't you? So you better make sure that you've got proper nutrition where something is. And are you going to get better than what mother's milk is? No. Mother's milk gives you the opportunity to see, God help us, we are not protein eaters, period. You are not a fat eater either. You are mostly living off hydrogen, which is called sugar. Sugar as a word, it's really an old word. It's an old massa word by the Phoenicians, sugar. So if it's carbohydrate, it can be called saga. But saga is like when you say saga to someone, they shudder because saga is blamed for everything. And so people could hardly open their mouth where they are without having some brainwashing come out of their mouth like crazy, matter of fact. And so they're against saga, but they're fine with fats and protein. This is just stupid. Most people die because they've eaten way too much protein, excessive nitrogen. Look into that podcast. It's a good one, Nitrogen Addiction. And look into the mycotoxin one too, because that gives you a little bit of a background into everything. So just like geoengineering storms and geoengineering ice, so it's much colder and it will crack glass because it's unusual. It's not like an ice that's usual, because the ice that's usual doesn't have iodine in it or potassium and things, and it's not going to burn black and this sort of thing. It's not going to just evaporate but not break down into water. But this new engineered storms and things to make it really, 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 really cold and bring the Arctic down. Nobody's going to say that Arctic heating and ionizing heaters are not being used to be able to control the weather and stuff. And where's all this graphene oxide coming from that's coming to be found in people's bodies? Where's all aluminium oxide and barium and those things that's coming into people's bodies? Where does that come from? Is that from the fly ash, the coal fly ash that's being used to spray us? And is that wherever microplastics are, you can find that in water today? And these are things which is really not a good sign. So if you open up the court to matters that's like this, and that crime, it's possible to be able to have public opinion affect public policy, and for laws and things to be able to be made. But if you ask anybody today, like, do you know that there's an equity side and a statute side? They go, what? Do you know that there's a private side and a public side? They say, what? You see, it's a purposeful condition that people have been left with, not the means to be able to change anything, where we sure have the means to change things, and we should, because we're living in a Commonwealth nation, and there's 5 nations that still have common law, basically, really. And these are the nations which are for communism. These are called heritage to communism. They call them inherited heritage, because you've got some common sense or common law where something is. So we start out in our program today, we're just talking about the word cure. You can hear that the meaning of all of this can go much further, because like what we said, is a man, is a woman, that's your title, and you're not a drive whore or a nurse or a gardener or any occupation. That's not your identity. And so where words are used, like the word cure, it comes like what we said, from tanning animal skins, curing flesh, pickling things so that they couldn't break down, like putting sulfur dioxide and sulfur onto food, to make it look bright still or something. Then you've got all these apparent natural healers, and they're completely really off the chart. Why? Well, because they're boiling herbs, boiling herbs in water, or putting herbs into alcohol, or putting herbal extracts into glycerol and things. This is just completely wrong. Why? Well, because you're not going to be getting fat-soluble element and a whole range of other things, which is gelatinous material that's supposed to be there and things. None of these things end up being in whatever you've done out of a bottle, typically. And most of it was really cooked up. Yes, it was. It's got nothing to do with what it would have in nature. And who's letting people know this? You need to be able to really eating once a day. We're monophasic. We're not biphasic or triphasic like a graze whore is. A graze whore is something just munching along right through the day like a cow might, for instance. So if you've heard benefits to really relate to longevity, you're going to have heard about calorie restriction for sure. If you've only lived off boiled and bottled herb and this sort of thing, you're going to tell me that that's the cure, or that's going to help heal something. It could be just as bad, basic as many chemical compounds and toxins. So what happens to potassium? Potassium, when you find it in nature, you find it with 19 north negatives and 18 south positives. And what happens when you cook that? It loses its spare north negatives. So potassium is supposed to function properly in our body. It's supposed to have that spare north negative with it. And when it doesn't, is it going to function as well? No, it's not. What happens when you cook something is you're going to tell me that spare north negative is still there where the nutrient is? No, it's not. So it's not going to function as well as what it could if it were cold processed. Cold processing and enzymatic activity and keeping the three-dimensional structure, these are things which we're coming into a modern world more. These are the ways that you should look at something more. So otherwise the pancreas could be just full of stone. Did you ever hear about that? Well, certain if you've looked into our work, you'll have heard us talking about flushing out stone from the pancreas and other organs. Pretty much stone is right through the body. It all has to be dissolved. And someone might do a bit of an enema, and when they do that enema on the fourth day, when they do a flush and things, its design is to really be able to relax the sphincter of body in the moment of that, so you can dump more stones out. And have you ever heard of the Brunner glands? The Brunner glands are amongst the largest organ in our body, passing all the way through the first small intestine and the proximal portion of the ileum. So, what about the Harderian glands? These are the organs around your eyes. What is the Harderian glands used for? Producing daylight melatonin. Is daylight melatonin useful because it's going to protect your colon? It sure is. If you don't have melatonin that's low, don't tell me that you're going to have proper intestinal tract. You're going to end up with neoplastic sorts of conditions and things, you see. So maybe you can have heard a little about how somebody could be tuning more into where this work is, and you focus on clearing away stone. And have you ever heard about that? That is stone, which is made up mostly of calcium phosphate, calcium carbonate, and varying degrees of calcium combined with uric acid, malic acid. And these are things which end up as sort of stone. Some of these stones are soft, they're not just all hard. But have you ever heard about this? You see, what about blood formation? That blood formation, it didn't never come from mitotic cell division, nor did any element in nature. It's really transmutated by life colloid, and all life arises as a red blood corpuscle originally, and this is actually what's got totipotency in the body, not just a mast cell. But like a red blood corpuscle becomes a mast cell. Are there nutrients like comfrey, for instance, is very good. It's a good example of something which I've used to help stimulate new growth. And in most people's mind, that's sort of, well, you must have got some mast cells to do that. It's like, yes, you do. The red blood corpuscle breaks down into this to be able to make everything that you need. So if you've got a closer proximity to what's atomic, but what happens where somebody was really close by, where those nuclear testings was and explosives, yes? Isn't it that years even later, somebody could be eligible for compensation because they were so close to where all of those nuclear tests went on? So if we look, you go back to 1951, you're seeing a lot of nuclear explosions and things as testing and stuff until 1962. And people lived through all of that. And if you were part of it all and close enough by, you're eligible for compensation today, you see. And so, you know, that was a long time ago, and didn't anybody know that they were going to toxify things when they did that? Yes, they did. They sure did. And they went ahead and did it anyway. When Roundup gets underway, was there lots of controversy about that toxin being released into the environment? It sure was. It was heavy, lots, matter of fact. Most people knew that this was wrong to do. But you've got corporate interest today, and so you've got these corporates running along and doing whatever they love, like pumping asbestos into people's bodies, or not noticing, gee, we've got a real challenge because we've got asbestos, and it's only in the 90s, basically early, suddenly, you know, asbestos gets banned. But look at all the harm that was caused long before this and all the years that have passed by where that was used. Are you going to say that graphene oxide doesn't do exactly like what, asbestos does? It pretty much does the same. It's really sharp. Shards. It absolutely causes inflammation of the body. Graphene oxide does. So excessive sorts of eating where somebody's just chowing down on beans, for instance, legumes, and they're consuming heavy amounts of acid in relation to what's alkaline, and it makes the blood more alkaline and the tissue more acidic. And this is modern bodies. So if you don't deactivate what's eaten and it's raw, are you going to be consuming enzyme inhibitors with that food? Yes. Yes, you are. Enzyme inhibitors going to not work properly for you? It's not going to work properly for you. Why? Because it's got enzyme inhibitors that's blocking and stopping proteins from being able to be broken down properly. So no matter what, if you eat legume, you're going to be ending up releasing a lot of excessive phosphate and all nuts and seed and things like that. If they were consumed raw, they can't be properly. Why? Well, because they've got to be activated. They should be soaked and dried, and or even sprouted, and then they can be consumed more. So, providing you avoid legumes, yes, because it's got indigestible phytates, excessive lentil or mung bean are common, lentils and mung bean. The consumption of these primarily causes digestive issues and upper stomach switching off to produce more somatostatin and slow stomach emptying. And don't tell me that anybody that's tucking into lots of these beans, they don't have dry eye sockets. Would you look at these people, they've got no tissue anymore around their eyes. Their eyes start to become more and more sunken. And you say you've got lots of people just massive bowls of legumes, even sprouted. It's just off the chart wrong. So having indigestible protein where the legume is and slowing the stomach down the pancreas because somatostatin is released, and then passing massive amounts of gas, having a distended stomach, having felt tiredness and looking like death warmed up, basically. So looking at the tissue around the eyes, most people who are doing things just like that, they look like death warmed up, honest. So most of these people are doing a lot of beans and even sprouting those beans, but massive amounts of that food. They look unhealthy. Their skin comes to be looking much older, and it's thickened. The skin starts to get thickened around the facial skin. Their eyes, like I said, the Harderian glands, which is around your eyes, all start to get shriveled up and dried. The kidneys start to act up, and the bladder and urination starts to be more at night and this sort of thing. And it's common to see gas in those people, and they're always farting, never not, and they're bloated. They feel stuffed and sleepy. And they'll eat and go to sleep afterward. That's just a sign that immune challenge has gone on and you've got some allergy there. You've got massive amounts of oligosaccharide and complex sugars and things, and this is trouble, honest. So looking at how much is left in the intestine that didn't get digested, how long did it take to pass through the intestine? Did it empty out properly? Most of the times it wasn't proper. So where foodstuffs is eaten like bean and flesh and it's excessive heavy protein, pretty much it stimulates somatostatin to be released, causes the upper stomach to be turned off and the pancreas. After that, are you going to have glucagon in these things? No, you're not. And this is part of the reason why, some of these chemicals that people have consumed lately more, and they maybe lost some weight and this sort of thing because it's got a glucagon-like protein in it. But why shouldn't you be focused on bringing back the glucagon like you're supposed to, you see, by what you're consuming? So life food really has its emphasis in life begetting life and dead begets dead. Otherwise, all other foods end up creating a lot more glycol and ketone and fatty acid, and that doesn't mimic anything like our mother's milk, okay? So looking into rare cases where sensitive individuals are, you really can see a triggered inflammation, that issues go on where kidney function is, hyperalkalemia, kidneys get compromised, and older as you get, the more calcium you might have in your blood, more than what you should. And cortisol is one of the major reasons why you have a high calcium content. If you reduce cortisol, reduce your stress, have a better response, your blood is going to have a proper levels of calcium in it. But otherwise, bean and flesh is just dead food, honest. And a lot of raw food is just dead food, actually, and like made up out of bean and flesh. And it's got excessive protein, which you could look into with other podcasts that we have. And it also contains lectins and totally indigestible phytate, which interfere with micromineral absorption. You're looking through where dead food is. It could be just cooked and all the nutrient cooked out of itself. And sprouting, if you sprout a bean, you're going to have a little bit less phosphate, but you're still going to have high phosphate and low calcium. And that's just totally foreign to what our species milk is. So as far as protein, sugar, and fat is concerned, it should mimic what our species milk and colostrum is. And this is really what life food nutrition is based upon as an insight. So excessive carbohydrate is really not easy to be able to digest that stuff. Lentils and chickpea and those sorts of things have really got a lot of oligosaccharide. It's really hard to digest and ferments more in the gut, creates discomfort, and causes people not to really feel like you can exercise. So raw beans truly are going to jump on your hard dairy glands bad, and also your brunner glands as well. And so, it's excessive where anything is. And it's like I was saying, look around your eyes and look at the hard-dairy glands and look to see if any sunkenness exists about that. This can all be grown back if you eat properly, like live food is. You could learn what live food is. But otherwise, consuming excessive animal flesh and beans and this sort of thing, and everything cooked and dead, and seed oils, really bad. Potassium is sort of really being cooked too much, lost its spare north negative, and processed meats all full of nitrates and nitrogen addiction, and nitrates you need to be able to cause a neoplastic condition. And so today you can see people eating beans, or eating flesh, all sorts of flesh, fish and birds and alligators and snakes and monkeys and anything crawling around, even horses and things. It's excessive, and it's not anything that really we've designed to be able to do. It compromises your kidney function, impairs all of that, and you've got a lot of indigestible protein where all of this is. And the same with cashew, for instance. It's got excessive amounts of material, which is really not digestible. And you can end up with all sorts of neoplastic conditions. So high potassium is usual, and on a dead food diet, it's excessive, wrong kind of potassium, really, and eating beans and flesh, it's going to be the same. So if you're looking into our work, of course, you can see a great insight into nutrition, and certainly in a lot of other areas like currency, which at some point we should have podcasts that relate and talk more about currency itself. So the ARM is an Alliance of Law movement, and the remedy more is for us to be able to bring things into an Article 3 and Article 4 circumstance so that we can create legislation. Otherwise, there's a force where anything is to change and continuously cause leadership to be not proper leadership at all, And all these offices are for rent. And so that's a criminal banking cartel of the one world order, CB Cower, cutting everybody off from proper financial transactions and all sorts of blackouts because of it. And the whole nation never gets, like black swan, which is what's gone on to collapse the nation. You see, so you and I, we should all be looking at the asymmetric, meaning it's not a tactic which is usual military, but it certainly is an asymmetric military sorts of tactics and things that's going on. And so, Bluetooth wireless earpods, for instance, does anybody know how much radio frequency that comes out of this? It's microwave frequency. And don't you know how much of that comes into a brain and this sort of thing, and how does that devalue your own sense of everything? It's really the science of ageism, yes, that's come along since the 80s. What does that mean? It means it's a science of you only being valued to live to the age of 59. And if something fits, it's okay, because like we've got ageism now. We only want people to live to age of 59 because that's your usefulness to the service provider and the WEF and these people, you see. So it's just you and I only having been living as a human mineral and having your energy mind and the body being used as an antenna. Anyway, we've really got some great podcasts coming up. That should be a topic which we do talk a bit about. Of course, don't get fried by small microwave ovens where your ears are. And what about all the synthetic fragrances and things? And who's really concerned about that today? When those fragrances came out, there sure was a lot of information about the dangers of it. And now it's just willy-nilly, not hardly anyone's talking about the dangers of these forever molecules like that's in fragrances and things, which is not natural, but synthetic. Anyway, just to wrap everything up, look, you and I, we're under the Magna Carta, yes, and you only really have contract law, that's it, and this is really what's governing everything. And if you can't take private property with permission, which you shouldn't be able to, you're supposed to have permission, it shouldn't be without consent, and then otherwise, look, this is a claim that can be being made, yes? Anyway, hope you guys are really having a wonderful day as you've been tuning into the podcast, and look forward to us. Catch up to you in another podcast coming up. Love you.